A note before we begin. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine that the map of the world has been folded around one city, Rome. Not just a capital, but a machine that pulls in grain from Egypt, silver from Spain, marble from Greece, soldiers from the Rhine, and strange gods from the East. Now imagine you and I are standing inside that machine in the year 37 of the Common Era, the day the streets begin to chant a single name, Gaius, the son of Germanicus, the man the soldiers nicknamed Caligula, Little Boots, back when he was a child among legions. If you lived with me through those 4 short years, you would see how quickly a beloved prince can become a feared ruler, and how a city built of stone can still feel fragile, like it is holding its breath. You would walk the Palatine Hill where power lives behind painted walls. You would smell the Tiber River at low water. You would hear the crowd in the Circus Maximus roar like weather. And you would learn this truth the hard way. In Rome, geography is destiny. Roads, ports, frontiers, and palaces decide who eats, who fights, who survives, and who vanishes. And by the end, you would be there on a cold morning in January 41st, when the empire changes hands in a corridor. If you are not subscribed to my channel yet, take a second right now to subscribe and like this video. It genuinely helps the channel grow, and it is how we keep making stories like this one, with the depth and detail they deserve. Part 1. The day Rome falls in love again. You would feel it before you understand it. The mood, the lift in the air, like a storm has finally moved on. We are in Rome, and the city is layered like a hillside of noise. The poor crowd into the low districts and the narrow lanes, especially in places like the Subura, where laundry hangs like flags and the smell of cooking oil clings to the stone. The wealthy occupy higher ground and wider streets. Above all of it, the Palatine Hill rises like a clenched fist, crowned with imperial residences that are less a palace and more a connected network of grand houses, courtyards, reception halls, and guarded corridors. From there, the emperor can look down toward the Forum Romanum, the old political heart, and toward the Capitoline, where temples sit like watchtowers. The old emperor, Tiberius, is dead. Some say he died naturally at Misenum near the Bay of Naples, where the sea air is mild and the naval base watches the Tyrrhenian. Some whisper darker things because Rome always whispers. What matters is what happens next. The city turns toward Germanicus' son as if towards sunlight. Germanicus was the hero Rome wanted, the general who fought along the Rhine and died too young. His memory is still currency. When Gaius arrives, people are not only welcoming a man, they are welcoming an idea of relief. If you were beside me that week, you would see how Rome performs grief and hope at the same time. The funeral rites, the public ceremonies, the distribution of money and favors. You would watch senators in bright white togas with purple edging trying to look dignified while also reading the crowd's mood like sailors reading wind. You would notice how the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's household soldiers, hold the quiet power of proximity. Their barracks sit inside the city. Their officers live close to the palace. In Rome, distance is safety, and closeness is leverage. At first, Caligula plays the role perfectly. He honors Tiberius's memory in public while letting the city feel it has escaped Tiberius's shadow. He spins on games. He speaks of mercy. He recalls exiles. He seems young, energetic, almost eager to be loved. And you, if you're honest, you would probably be drawn in too. It is hard not to be, because the alternative is the older Rome of suspicion, informers, and quiet dread. But you would also notice the empire behind the theater. Rome is not fed by applause. It is fed by logistics. Walk with me down toward the Tiber. The river is the city's artery and its problem. It carries barges, it floods, it stinks, it enables trade, it spreads disease. Downriver sits Ostia, the port where grain ships arrive. The bread you eat in Rome is tied to winds on the Mediterranean and harvests in North Africa and Egypt. If the sea is rough, the price of food rises in the markets, and Rome becomes restless. The emperor's popularity is not only politics, it is also supply. You would hear people talk about Egypt with the familiarity of people who have never been there, because Egypt is Rome's stomach. You would hear sailors in taverns describe Alexandria as a glittering harbor city with its own personality, Greek-speaking and sharp-edged, and you would realize that the empire is not one culture. It is a web of cultures stitched together by roads, taxes, and soldiers. And then within months, something shifts. Caligula falls severely ill. Rome, the whole city, seems to wait. People make vows to gods they barely believe in. Senators promise offerings. Ordinary citizens press into temples and burn incense because fear makes everyone religious. When he recovers, the city celebrates like it has survived a siege. But you, standing close enough to watch faces and listen to the tone of orders, would feel that the recovery is not a return. It is a turning. He comes back changed, not merely physically, politically, emotionally. The early warmth begins to harden. The jokes become sharper. The punishments become less predictable. The palace, which had felt like a place where power is performed, begins to feel like a place where power is tested. In Rome, that is when people start to measure their words. Part 2. The city learns to whisper. If you lived through the second stage of Caligula's reign, you would learn the geography of fear the same way you learn the geography of a neighborhood, by avoiding certain corners, by watching who walks with whom, by recognizing when a street suddenly empties. Rome is crowded, vertical, and flammable. Many people live in insulae, apartment blocks of timber and brick that can rise several stories. Fires are common. Collapse is common. The rich live in domus, single-family homes built around courtyards with frescoes, mosaics, and private water. This inequality is visible in the stone itself. You would walk from a broad paved street into an alley where daylight narrows, and it would feel like you stepped into another city. Caligula's spending continues, but it changes character. Early generosity begins to look like appetite. The treasury is not infinite, no matter how many provinces pay taxes. When money tightens, Rome has only a few levers: confiscations, new taxes, and the oldest lever of all, accusations. This is where the empire's legal culture becomes a weapon. Treason charges, crimes against the majesty of the emperor, can swallow anyone. Senators fear it because their status makes them visible. Wealthy equestrians fear it because their wealth makes them useful targets. Even ordinary people fear it because informers thrive when suspicion is rewarded. You would hear stories spreading like smoke. Some are surely exaggerated. Rome loves exaggeration, but the pattern is what matters. Caligula humiliates senators publicly. He reminds them again and again that their old republican pride is theater. He is the living center of the state. He can make them run beside his litter. He can force them into applause. He can convert dignity into a costume. He also plays with divinity in a way that feels different from earlier emperors. Roman religion is practical, contractual. You give offerings, you receive favor. But Caligula begins to present himself as something closer to a living god. Temples and statues become political messages. The line between reverence and obedience blurs. And then there are the spectacles, because Rome processes emotion in crowds. Imagine the Circus Maximus at full voice. The long track between the Palatine and Aventine Hills is packed with people. You smell sweat, dust, cheap wine, and animal musk. You hear faction chants, the blues and greens, as if they are armies. Chariot wheels scream on packed earth. The crowd's roar is not one sound, it is 1,000 sounds hidden at once like surf against rock. When the emperor appears, the arena becomes a mirror. The crowd watches him to learn what is safe to feel. You would also see another Rome, the Rome of elite banquets and private villas, especially around the Bay of Naples. That coastline, from Baiae to Puteoli to Misenum, is a playground of the powerful. Warm water, terraced gardens, painted dining rooms open to sea air. It is here that Caligula's extravagance becomes legend. There is a famous story that he orders a bridge of boats across the bay at Baiae, turning the sea into a road, and rides across it in a display of conquest over nature. Whether every detail is true or embellished by hostile writers, the point is that people believed it could be true because the emperor's will increasingly feels like it does not accept limits. You would hear sailors talk about strange imperial ships too, including enormous ceremonial vessels on Lake Nemi in the Alban Hills, south of Rome. The lake sits in a volcanic crater, dark and still, surrounded by forest. Big ships on a small lake sound absurd, almost like a dream, and yet Rome is full of engineering that turns absurdity into reality. Aqueducts drag water for miles, roads cut through hills. A lake can become a stage if power demands it. Meanwhile, beyond Italy, the empire's map stays real, and the legions stay hungry. Along the Rhine frontier, Rome's soldiers stare into German forests that feel endless, where the air is colder and the ground drinks footsteps. In the east, the Parthian Empire watches, a rival power with cavalry and its own pride. In North Africa, Rome's control rests on forts, cities, and alliances. The empire is stable only because its edges are held. And inside Rome, Caligula begins to rely more on personal guards, including Germans, because trust becomes rare. When a ruler trusts fewer people, he becomes surrounded by those who are closest and most armed. If you were living here with me, you would start to understand a grim rule. Tyranny is not only cruelty, it is randomness. When punishment feels unpredictable, everyone becomes cautious. Everyone becomes an actor. And the city that once shouted now learns to whisper, because whispers are safer than chants. Part 3. To the frontier and the end of the world. Now come with me out of Rome, because if you lived under Caligula, you would not only be trapped in palace rumors, you would also feel the pull of the frontiers, where the empire meets the unknown and where emperors go to prove themselves. We leave the city on roads built to last longer than dynasties. The Via Flaminia runs north toward the Adriatic. Other roads knit Italy together like seams. As we move, you see the empire's practical genius, milestones, bridges, way stations, and the constant movement of carts, messengers, and troops. Rome is not only marble, Rome is pavement. Crossing into Gaul, you would notice a change in landscape and architecture. Roman towns with forums and baths sit beside older local patterns. Vineyards spread, rivers widen. You begin to feel how Romanization works, not by erasing everything, but by laying Roman infrastructure over local life until the layers fuse. Caligula heads toward the Rhine. This is not just a trip, it is a statement. The Rhine frontier is where Germanicus, his father, made his fame. To go there is to touch the myth. At the frontier, you see the legions as a living organism, forts with disciplined geometry, barracks aligned, storehouses for grain, workshops for weapons, roads running straight where nature prefers, curves. The soldiers drill, repair, haul, and wait. A legion is not constantly fighting. It is constantly preparing, because the threat is not always an army. It is also winter, supply failure, disease, and boredom. You would stand on the riverbank and look across at the opposite shore, and you would feel a psychological border. On this side, Rome. On that side, forests and tribes that Rome labels barbarian, though the word says more about Rome's self-image than it does about the people across the water. The river is wide, cold, and fast. It carries logs, dead animals, sometimes bodies. It is a reminder that nature is not impressed by empire. Caligula wants the aura of conquest, and he wants the legion's loyalty. He reviews troops, he gives speeches, he stages authority, and then the campaign becomes strange. Later, writers describe theatrics and confusing orders. There are stories of soldiers ordered to gather seashells along the shore as spoils of the sea, and of grand gestures that feel like parody. You should understand those accounts carefully, because many surviving sources were written by elites who hated him, and scandal sells. But even if some details are distorted, the broader picture still lands. The frontier expedition does not produce the clean, heroic narrative Rome prefers. And yet, standing there with the soldiers, you would learn something important. Even a chaotic campaign requires real logistics. Ships are built or requisitioned. Grain is transported. Animals are slaughtered. Roads are repaired. Camps are supplied. The machine runs whether the emperor is wise or foolish, because the empire's survival depends on systems that outlast personalities. You would also hear about Britain. The island across the Channel is the unfinished thought in Rome's mind. Julius Caesar touched it a century earlier, but Rome never fully took it. To conquer Britain would be to complete a story. It would also secure prestige and perhaps resources. Caligula's plans in that direction flicker in the record, and whatever the exact intention, the idea matters. The emperor is thinking about the edge of the world. Stand with me on a northern coast, wind tearing at cloaks, and imagine looking across gray water toward a place that feels like myth. You understand why Rome wants it. Rome hates unfinished maps. But as we return south, you feel the other side of frontier power. Soldiers who have seen emperors come and go are not easily enchanted. They can cheer, but they also remember. And when a ruler's legitimacy feels unstable in Rome, rulers often try to stabilize it with military theater, because soldiers are the empire's final argument. As we approach Italy again, you would sense that Caligula has not gained what he truly needs: trust. Not in the Senate, not in the palace, not even fully among the men with swords. And in Rome, when trust runs out, plots begin. Part 4, A Corridor in January. If you lived to the end of Caligula's reign, you would remember it not as a grand battle or a foreign defeat, but as a moment of violence inside walls painted with luxury. We are back in Rome. The city's winter air is sharp, Smoke from cooking fire sits low in the streets. The Tiber looks darker. The days feel shorter, and the palace feels tighter, like everyone is breathing shallowly. By now, Caligula's relationship with the Senate is poisoned. Humiliation has piled on humiliation. Fear has turned into resentment. Resentment turns into resolve when people believe they have nothing left to lose. And then there is the Praetorian Guard again, always close, always watching. The emperor relies on them, but he also insults them, threatens them, treats them like tools. That is a dangerous combination. A guard that feels both essential and disrespected is a guard that may decide the state would look better without its master. You and I would walk the corridors near the imperial residences and the theaters where the emperor attends performances. You would notice how the palace is not one open hall but a maze built from connected houses over time. Corridors turn, doors lead to private courts, guards stand at key points, but no guard stands everywhere. Power lives in the gaps. On January 24th, in the year 41, the moment arrives. Accounts differ on details, but the outline is consistent. A group of conspirators, including officers of the Praetorian Guard, attack Caligula in a corridor as he moves between events. The killing is sudden, intimate, and brutal. There is no battlefield. There is no chance for a public speech. One moment, he is the center of Rome. The next moment, the center is gone. If you were there, you would feel how quickly the city's sound changes. First confusion, then screams, then the heavy, spreading silence that follows when people do not yet know which way danger points. In Rome, after an assassination, the first question is not, who did it? The first question is, who wins? Because winning decides truth. There is immediate chaos. Some conspirators want to restore the old republic, or at least pretend they can. But the republic is an idea without an army. The Senate debates. The guards control the streets. The crowd waits for a signal, and then, almost like a scene written by a cynical historian, Claudius is found and elevated. Claudius, the awkward uncle, the man many underestimated, suddenly becomes the answer. The Praetorian Guard, needing stability and reward, backs him. The empire chooses continuity over experimentation. You would understand, standing there, that the empire has become a system that selects for a certain outcome. It cannot go back. Too many provinces, too much money, too many soldiers, too much dependence on the emperor as a single point of decision. Caligula's death becomes a lesson that Rome will repeat. When a ruler makes too many enemies too quickly, the palace becomes the battlefield. The most dangerous frontier is not the Rhine or the sea to Britain. It is the 10 steps between a private room and a public hall. And if you ask me quietly what it felt like to live through it, I would tell you this. It felt like living inside a story that is always being rewritten. Yesterday's hero becomes today's monster. Today's rumor becomes tomorrow's fact. And ordinary people like you, learn to survive by reading the city's signs. Bread prices, guard movements, Senate whispers, crowd mood, and the emperor's face. That is what you would see if you lived in Caligula's Rome with me. Outro before you go. If you made it to the end, thank you for listening. If you have not subscribed yet, subscribe now, and please like the video. It tells the platform you want more stories with this kind of immersive documentary detail, and it helps us keep building the next one.